Welcome back to It's Not Me, It's You, Breaking Up with Your Comfort Zone. I'm Jack Bedekelian, the master of humorous transformation, here to tell you that if you've ever ugly cried in the middle of a growth spurt, well, congratulations, you're doing it right. In this episode, we'll take the time to talk about that phase of transformation, the phase where everything feels like a mess, where you feel uncertain, insecure, you even start questioning many, if not all, of your life choices. You know, this is the part that we don't really see too much in the motivational highlight reels. But I'm sure that for those of you with who this will resonate, being in a mid breakdown stage, whether you're eating half a pint of ice cream or you're lying down and listening to slow songs and you're saying to yourself, well, why did I even start this whole thing? That, my friends, was and is the ugly cry phase. It's that messy middle that no one really posts about. There are some people, but what we see on social media, and I'll talk about in a later segment, is a lot more of the grass is greener. So today and in this episode, we'll be talking about why transformation can sometimes feel like you are going through an identity crisis. And more importantly, we'll be talking about why that feeling is actually a good thing. Pushing yourself past your comfort zone, putting yourself in a situation of uncertainty, in a questionable state, in a place where you want and know that you need to pass through, may bring you and will bring you to different variations of this ugly crying phase. And as you go through this ugly cry phase, you'll be presented with many different feelings and emotions, some of which are going to be what we're used to. Remember how I spoke about the comfort zone and how she wants to keep you in your cage, how she is doing her best to make you feel like life is great where you are and there's no need for you to look further or move any further. And those are the times when you will start to feel these emotional changes. And you could go either of two ways. Well, you can go multiple ways, but that's when you're going to come to the points of questioning. And they could be questioning their life choices, or they could be questioning from the perspective of your comfort zone, which is why didn't we just stay where we were? And it's at those times when you will be faced with those decisions of, do I move forward? Do I slow down? Do I quit? One thing I'd share with you is, instead of quitting, let yourself feel what you're going through. Let yourself feel it. Try to understand it. Regroup. And if following these next topics, your answers do not match with your original objective, then it's up to you. But if what you want to accomplish and how you're going about your regroup or your moment of reflection still holds true to what your objective was, then continue to push forward. If you need to try again, do so. Because guess what? As you are journeying to a phase of self improvement, as you are journeying through this transformation, breakdowns are what lead to breakthroughs. So let's start with growth. And in some cases, okay, well, let's have some fun here. Some of you may have thought you'd be Beyonce by now. But here you are, you're crying in a hoodie, you're eating cereal for dinner. Well, guess what? Welcome to real growth. Growth isn't a montage. Change is awkward. It's not curated, it's not filtered. And I'm using a word, I know who's already gonna poke fun at me for this, but I love them for that. It's non-linear, right? And growth or change often looks like regression before progress. Think about that for a second. Sometimes wanting to move forward feels like you're moving back. Does that make sense to you? I mean, if you think about it, does growth or could growth kind of feel like you're standing still, but everything inside of you is moving? Think about that for a second. I'd love to hear your feedback, or if you have a better way to explain it. So, coming back to this idea of growth, and I use the term montage, growth not being a montage, right? Real change. Real change isn't a movie sequence that's set to inspiring music. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's going to involve ice cream or questionable life decisions. And, we've all seen these montages in movies where the character trains hard, they glow up, they overcome obstacles. And guess what? It's all in under 90 seconds with this upbeat soundtrack. But in real life, come on, guys, growth is more like reality TV, where there are blooper reels. And even though there are bloopers, right? They still appear like they're perfectly edited highlights. There are days when your progress is just choosing not to text your ex or deciding to wash your hair. Real growth is late night journaling, it's silent rage, it's small wins that no one notices. And most importantly, real growth is that quiet courage to keep going when you feel like nothing is changing. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And that's what makes it powerful. That's why when you transform with power. You transform stronger than ever. Think about it. If you were to, for example, think about small wins, right? What are small wins? Well, small wins, using a movie analogy, what are small wins, right? They're something that may not have been noticed, but they still meant something real to you. And guess what? Small wins are just as important as big wins. A win is a win, guys. Do not discount anything or allow any win or accomplishment to fall under a categorization of how important they are. When you achieve or realize something, when you succeed, it doesn't make a difference what it is that you did. what impact it may have, it should still and always be viewed as an accomplishment. So this term, small win, big win, they might be something that is used, commonly used, but do not allow the term small win to have less power or less meaning, if I could say that. And when I talk about that, maybe you should take a moment to think about what your unseen growth, or what we just said, small win, actually looks like right now. If you sit back and try, and this may be very difficult at first because, as I mentioned before, things that do not or are devalued by us often get overlooked. And when they're overlooked, even when we want to think back, we may not see it because we did not value it as it should have been valued. So I would love to see or get some feedback from you on whether or not you were able to identify unseen growth and what it looked like. And by the same token, I'd like to ask a second question of thinking back on, let's say, this last week or last 2 weeks. Are there any areas where you may be mistaking discomfort for failure? So that's a challenge I'll give you. Let's start a not so Instagrammable wins journal. Each day you jot down one thing that felt hard, but you still did it. And then we have a look after having a full week of journaled small wins, if you will. Let's have a look and see. I want to see what your blooper reel would look like. So now, once you let go of the fantasy that growth looks polished and pretty, and you start to pull back a little bit and see that the truth is it's messy, it's emotional, it's full of plot twists. Now we come to the next part of our journey, which is the chaos of that emotional roller coaster. What we did just now prior to that is we just spoke about the fact that growth, again, it's not this montage, it's not, the movie. It is not something or a fantasy that looks so easy as you've seen in social media. Now we're starting to talk about true growth. We're talking about real, we're talking about raw. And what's more real and raw when you decide to change is the emotions that come with wanting to transform. Let's look at it this way. Let's think about it this way, right? We want to level up, if you will. I hope that's still a term amongst the youngsters. You want to level up. But the thing is, and the question you asking yourself is, well, why does me wanting to level up, why does wanting to become a better version of myself, wanting to achieve the best version of myself, feel like I'm strapped into this Six Flags ride, this ridiculous roller coaster that I've never seen or defies the logic of how a roller coaster would work? Well, the simple answer is it's because you are, right? It feels like you're strapped in because you are strapped in. 1 minute you're excited, the next minute You're anxious, you're nervous, you're questioning. Hopefully, not that often, but you could even be panicking. That's totally normal. If I can just say this, stay on the ride. That emotional roller coaster of leveling up, where you're excited to anxious to questioning to uncertain to potentially panicking, that process involves, and the process, excuse me, of change involves and it's fundamental that you go through both joy and fear. And sometimes you'll have to go through that at the same time. That's not a red flag. Okay. It's an update. It's you transforming. It's an energetic update. Transformation doesn't feel like transformation. First of all, I wish I was a transformer, and I have to stop myself because I could talk about that one for a long time. But transformation feels like chaos. Okay. It doesn't feel like just a simple thing that will happen within, you know, a day or two. It could feel like chaos because, again, one moment you're hyped up, you're looking at your vision board, you've got the energy, you're saying, this is where I'm going, this is what, and you're focused and you're visualizing, you're trying to manifest. And then 15 minutes later, what are you doing? You're on Google saying, how do I fake my own disappearance? That's transformation, guys. And here's something. When you're at that low, if you will, in your roller coaster, very important. It's not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're growing. Remember, I spoke about this before. Sometimes growth may feel like regression. So that panic you feel, that's your nervous system. It's your nervous system that's adjusting to a new way of being. It's emotional altitude sickness. And when you feel like that, you may go through these situations of, what do I do? How do I keep going? Or do I keep going, right? Here's what I'll tell you. Stay on the ride. Take Gravol, throw up if you need to, but don't get off. And before we actually transition into how would we keep going, or how do we address the scenario where we feel like we may want to quit, I'll just share a little exercise, a little tip. You're having a little bit of a difficult time. The ride is definitely not what you may have expected. You might be feeling altitude sickness, nervous, nauseous. Stay on. And let's have some fun with it. Let's, for the sake of being able to come back to and eventually laughing at it, name your current roller coaster. Give it a name in your journal. You don't need to detail anything. Just simple line saying, this is my roller coaster, and give it a name. And we'll come back to it later because I'm sure you're going to look back and you're going to have a good laugh. What's important here is, again, speaking about what do we do while we're in this roller coaster? Well, while we're riding this roller coaster and we're riding through the highs and the lows, there are going to be moments, maybe several moments, where you'll, I guess, for, as blunt as possible, you'll just want to quit. And it's not because you're weak, but it's because growth takes everything. Growth requires you to continue to challenge and to fight back against that woman. She's not a woman, but comfort zone. And she is doing everything she can to try and bring you back. So, what do you do? How do you keep going when she's getting the better of you and you actually do want to stop, or you feel like you want to stop? So, let's talk about that for a second. I'm this is truth, what I'm sharing with you. If you feel like giving up, celebrate it. You're in that messy middle. This is where, as I mentioned before, breakdown becomes breakthrough. This is the time where you yourself can break through to another level, can open a door that you otherwise never believed was even there. And what's important is at any time, or any time that you may go through these types of moments, remember one thing: wanting to quit is not a failure, it's feedback. You're hitting resistance. Why? Take a pause there, like as if I've got somebody listening, or rather in front of me. But the truth is, why are you hitting resistance? It's because you're stretching. Not like my stomach, because that stretches all the time. I'd like to call it bloating, but apparently I've got what's medically considered center fat. That's another story. I'm going to get very emotional about it, so I don't want to talk about it. But when you are at that point, like I said before, coming back to the messy middle, Jesus, now that I said it, my middle is not messy, okay? It might be center fat, but it's not messy. Coming back, if you feel like giving up, you're hitting that resistance, it's because you're stretching. Let's talk about pushing through that situation, because messy, not Lionel Messi, messy with a Y, does not mean wrong. Messy means real. Quitting usually doesn't come from the lack of capability. This is a true statement. It comes from, or it is influenced from, being exhausted, or being unsupported, or convinced, or allowing yourself to be convinced that struggle is, one, not worth it, or two, struggle is failure. And think about that for a second. Struggle is not failure. But does that make sense with some of you, that the word alone, struggle, means that you are not moving forward? And by default, you may interpret that as a failure. So, what I'm here to say is struggle, it's part of the new build, right? If you don't struggle, let's be honest, let's just call it straight out here. If you're not struggling, are you really changing? If you want to change, but you're not willing to look outside of your comfort zone, then where is change? What is change? Because if you're in your comfort zone, there is zero change, right? If you want change, you need to do something or multiple things differently. Doing things differently again will cause uncertainty, will cause situations of feeling chaos or concern or, again, exhaustion or fear. And of course, that all rolls up into struggle. What's important again here is struggle is a requirement of the new you. It's part of your new build. Every shift, every big shift, usually comes with a what the hell am I doing phase. Think about it. When you're in a situation where you feel like you may want to quit, if you take a step back, if you zoom out and you try to look at it from a 30,000 foot lens, and you ask yourself, or you challenge your feeling to want to quit with revisiting your why. If you take a second, you take a break. And listen, taking a break, by the way, if you hear taking a break, let's just be clear for a second. Taking breaks are pauses, they are not an ending. Don't ever allow yourself to mistake or hide behind taking a break to allow something to end. If you feel like you want to quit, challenge yourself with remembering the why. Is where you are, is what you want to accomplish still aligned with what you initially set out to do? Is where you feel like you want to go still aligned with what you initially set out to do? Right? Why am I doing this? Why am I wanting, or rather, that question of when we came back to it earlier, we were talking about why did I do this to myself? Well, why did you do this to yourself? Why are you on this roller coaster? Why are you going through these ups and downs? If the answer to that question, again, is still aligned with your reason for having started, then do you think it's fair, or do you think it's actually smart to want or to allow yourself to quit? Let's do a small little challenge here, right? And before we even do this, this is just like a little tip, if you will. And before I even say that, I want to say one thing that's very important when it comes to the transformation. And it comes, or it speaks to, again, to the take a break part that I just mentioned earlier. Look, guys, you don't need to be perfectly consistent. You just need to be willing to keep coming back. You need to be willing to push yourself so long as, and again, if you are coming back and your why still is aligned with your initial purpose, then you just need to be willing to keep on coming back. So that being said, here's one that I've shared before. Write yourself a little letter. Write yourself a keep going letter. And just put it somewhere. Whether you want to have it in your phone or you want to stick it on a mirror or just put it in a drawer somewhere, write yourself that keep going letter for the next time you feel like you may want to quit. And yeah, it could be funny. Like I said, word it the way you'd like. But if I can just share a couple of things to add into that letter, remember to include, or rather, let's include the remember your why. so that you can come back to the start of this journey. So you can come back to why I embarked on this transformation. So now we're going to talk about, I did mention social media before, and using social media or transitioning to that. Let's just say, right, while you today are listening and we're in this, on this roller coaster, we're fighting to stay in the game. We're being bombarded by these beautiful after pictures on social media where transformation and transition is so easy, or it's so smooth, and here is the grass, it's not just green, it smells fantastic, and in between the blades of grass there's money. Listen guys, don't be fooled. Most of this story lives in the middle, the part that not too many people will post. This is the part where you and those who really want to transform, you need to be focused on. That is the hurdle. That is where you need to traverse, where you need to go through. Social media, these glow ups, they can be cute, but let's be honest, they left out that part where you ugly cried into a burrito, right? Transformation isn't linear or pretty. Real change happens. It can happen in the dark. It'll happen before it ever shows up online, right? The before and after always, or more often than not, skips the during, aka the breakdown, the doubt, the crying in the shower. So, what do you see when it comes to social media? You're just seeing narrative, you're seeing confidence, you're not seeing the crying in your car before therapy, or unlearning toxic beliefs, or deleting somebody's number for the seventh time. What you see is the after photo, and that after photo or the story doesn't show or speak of the nights when you doubted yourself, or the mornings where you got up anyway. Social media is, if you think about it, it's a trailer, right? Not a trailer park or a trailer, but it is a trailer to a movie. It's not the documentary. So you aren't behind, right? You're living the part that everyone else is editing out. So let's take a second here, right? And let's think about, right, being allowed to look like a hot mess. Let's talk about, for example, giving yourself, or actually I'd ask that question, right? What are you not giving yourself credit for? And if we're using social media as the example, what would you not post because you don't believe it's polished enough? And where are you comparing someone's highlight reel to your, or how is more the better question. How can you explain comparing someone's highlight reel to your behind the scenes, right? Remember, guys, you're allowed to look like a hot mess while you're becoming a masterpiece. Becoming a masterpiece is not a before and after. There is the middle, and that is where you need to focus and work. And as you shed old patterns and beliefs, something even deeper happens. You start shedding parts of yourself. That's where the regression piece might come in. Because sometimes, and this is something that you should just think about for a second, knowing what you know today is all within this comfort zone. And the moment that you decide to step out of that comfort zone and you start to question and you start to change, as you are shedding, as some of the patterns or beliefs that you had are actually being questioned and potentially even being adjusted or adapted, you're sharing parts of you are shedding, parts of yourself, losing parts of who you knew or thought you were. Let's be honest, it would feel less like progress, right? You kind of feel like you're regressing. But the truth is, going through this journey, when you start to shed and you start to get these I don't know who I am anymore moments, what's important to know here is you're not broken, right? You're starting to change. You're becoming. That who am I crisis is your old identity. It's your old identity you are trying to shed it. And growth will disrupt identity. Growth can sometimes feel like grief or confusion or a full on ego death. And some people deserve that ego death, but they themselves need to do it. And that's normal and it's necessary. When your identity shifts, it could feel like you're breaking up with your old self because you're starting to normalize. You're not broken, you're in transition. Transitions are weird. My middle name is Transition. Letting go of who you used to be means grieving. You're going to say that's crazy, but it's true. Because coming back to our comfort zone and coming back to what I said previously, we've been living in this bubble, or as I've mentioned before, in the cage that she's put us in this comfort zone. And we have been living in this cage, being sold the idea that this is where we're safe. This is where everything we want is available to us, and the different variations of it isn't as bad as it could be, right? We are being held back. We may want to change, but we're doing nothing about it because we're in this comfort zone. We are allowing her to prioritize and more so influence our decision making. So when you think about it, letting go of who you used to be, right? Imagine you finally break out of that cage. It's going to be great, but it doesn't mean that it will not come with some sort of grieving, because for all this time, this is a zone where you believed and once felt safe. If you think about it, it's like you're breaking up with a version of yourself that helped you survive. That version never didn't help you thrive, but they helped you survive. And these moments, the moments where I don't know who I am anymore, they aren't signs of loss, they're signs of rebirth. Where's the confusion, right? I'm coming from the comfort zone, which in essence really is the cage, right? To I'm shedding out, I've broken through, and I am getting rid of an identity, an old identity, one that, again, may have had me believe that they were there for me, but they only helped me survive. And now, not knowing where you are or who you are anymore, you are you're reborn. You're starting to wow, I was going to use the word rebirth, but you are actually going through a rebirthing process, right? And where's your confusion? Let's use a butterfly. You're in this in the cocoon right now. You're not lost, you're just becoming. When you get to that point, or as you're transforming, just want to share some questions to ask yourself or to come back to, because I think they're always great to be able to challenge and try to understand yourself better. That's part of our journey to bettering ourselves. Think about, for example, one question is, when it comes to the identity, to your old identity, if you're grieving, what exactly are you grieving? And if you are grieving, what is new about this reborn version? What does the new identity represent to you? And why does it feel scary? Okay, so coming back to the old identity and what we're grieving. If you're liking the journaling, if you're liking the taking down notes or small exercises, here's a small one that I'd share with you. Write yourself a goodbye letter. Write the goodbye letter to your old self. And this is not something I'm not an innovator here. We see this all the time. You hear about, uh, or you see in reality TV. Yes, I'm a sucker for reality TV, but you see a lot of these reality TV shows where people are asked to write their younger selves a letter, right? Telling them what they can expect or what to be looking out for. In this case, what you're doing is you're going to write yourself a goodbye letter to your old self, and you're going to thank them. You're going to forgive them, and then write a welcome note to who you're becoming. This is a fun one. Who you were may have been helping you survive, but did they help you thrive? I think the answer is, in most cases, not to your expectations. So, writing them a letter thanking them and forgiving them, and then transition from thinking about your old self to the new self, and write yourself a welcome note. Write yourself a welcome note to acknowledge who you're becoming, and then read both of them out loud. Look, guys, we're talking about grief, right? And no one tells you, right? As I mentioned before, growth could come with grief. There is a grief, or there could be grief, excuse me, related to outgrowing your old life. And when I talk about grief in this situation, you start to realize a lot of things as you transform. And some of those things come as a surprise. For example, you start to realize that some friendships were based on a version of you that no longer exists, or that some of your goals don't fit anymore. Some environments drain you because you're not pretending like you used to, or you're not, and I can't do this. People who know me know this. I cannot pretend. I am not a hypocrite. If there is an issue, you can count on me to be straightforward, honest. It's never with the intent of being mean. It's who I am at my core. And I strongly believe that the biggest and best form of respect is to be truthful with whoever it is you're talking to, or whoever it is that is in front of you. Coming back to this grief, as you outgrow your old life, it's important to know that outgrowing that old life is not something, or shouldn't be misinterpreted as you being ungrateful for that life. It means that you are aligned with who you want to become. Does it hurt? Yeah, it's going to hurt, right? It's like finding out that your favorite t-shirt just doesn't fit anymore. You love it. You still love it. It served you. It was the best. You've got memories. But the problem is you've changed. Yes, I know I said shirt. Yes, I'm a little chunky monkey. And that's okay. You're not losing everything, right? Now you're making space for what actually fits. And as you shift into a more aligned version of yourself, here's the what could be at first the sad part. People might get uncomfortable. Some might cheer you on, and others might actually try to pull you back. And I'm sure as I've said this, you know of, or you may have actually had to go through a similar experience. Something important to share with you. Not everyone is going to clap for you, and that's fine. First off, the fact that I'm even saying that not everyone will clap for you, I would just like to share that if your priority, or if within your priorities there is a need to be recognized, then you should take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, what is more important? Is me being true to myself and serving my own needs important, or is having other people's recognition more important? That's another question, but let's just come back, right? So again, people might say you've changed, and guess what? You have, right? You have. It's normal. You are evolving, and you're allowed to evolve what beyond what others expect of you, or expect you to be. In your comfort zone, you are familiar. You act a certain way. Your relationships have a certain connection and a back and forth. And the thing is, as you're changing, some of the people only knew, and sorry to say this, but were only willing to love that old version of you, that old version that who For example, who overgave, who played small, who held back, who said yes too much. The older version who, let's be quite honest, who is and could have been easily taken advantage of. Now, I want to be clear here. It doesn't make them bad if they're unable to adapt to the new version of you. It doesn't make them bad. It just means that they're not meant to come with you on the next chapter. You are evolving. And again, I'm saying this because your evolution does not mean that those around you are going to evolve as well. Every one of us has the choice, and our choices are only our choices. So if those around you are confused or they are misinterpreting your growth, it might be difficult. But you have to remember, and I'd like you to remind you of one thing. You don't owe anyone anything. And more importantly, and that I know this comes across as sounding mean. What I'm saying is when it comes to you and your own evolution, your well-being, putting yourself first, you don't owe anyone, and certainly you don't owe anyone your old self. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if you see, maybe I can clarify it by saying this. Having someone within your close-knit group who is not able to understand your change or is misinterpreting your growth for something else, do you think it would be fair to you to actually say, well, no, let me stop what I'm doing so that that person feels better? Doesn't that sound like real regression? Doesn't that sound like holding yourself back? I'm going to share a little affirmation here with you. And it's important to not only know and say this, but to believe it, because it is a truth. I am allowed to grow, even if it makes others uncomfortable. So just to repeat that affirmation again, just repeat it and be sincere when you say it. I'm allowed to grow, even if it makes others uncomfortable. As we move on, and before I come to the end of our episode here, just want to share, it's one thing to outgrow other people, and it's a total other thing when you start to outgrow your own patterns. I don't want to go too deep into it just yet, but this is something in a future episode, and it gives me goosebumps because it's something that is real magic. I'll just, before I say anything, I just want to say that when you start catching yourself in real time, before or just before you spiral or sabotage, that, my friends, is a true transitional moment. So I think we covered quite a few topics this week, in this episode rather. And if you hit a tough spot, let's say in your growth journey, if you're currently in that what the F was I thinking phase, good news, you're right on track. Don't quit. Instead, like I mentioned, just take a deep breath, remind yourself, first off, challenge yourself to ensure that your objectives are still aligned. And then remind yourself that the phase that you're going through is temporary and keep going. Okay, gang, so that's a wrap for this episode. I think we covered quite a few points. We even shared quite a few challenges. I think what we can just say to really sum up this episode is, again, it's important to be aware that you are allowed to grow, that growth transition will be ugly. It will be uncomfortable. You'll be going through those highs and lows. But at the end of the day, pushing through and being true to your objective, even at some points when you feel like you might want to quit, or you feel like you're actually going backwards instead of forwards, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, when you start to actually see a new version of yourself, a version of yourself who shedded parts that no longer serve you, that feels awesome. That's magic. So that's it for this episode. If it spoke to you, if I made you laugh through tears, again, share with a friend, comment. Your feedback is truly important. And remember, just because it's ugly now, it doesn't mean it won't be beautiful later. Next week, we're going to talk about breaking up with people pleasing. So I want you to think about that and get ready to say no without that post-rejection spiral.
'Cause Jack is the master of humorous transformation, and here are the lyrics for this song. And I'm not too happy about it, right? Just